Hello, movie lovers. Welcome home. My name is Amy Hinserling, and you are listening to Watch This List. Today is a special episode of Amy's Progress with my friend Andrew Draper, where we are covering another documentary. I've actually started to associate Andrew with documentaries now because whenever I watch one of the earliest recommendations you gave me was Only the Young, which I feel like is very kindred to this choice. And and then we did the work together. And when I saw Daughters, I also thought of you. So you're like you're like the documentary man,
The doc of docs.
the doc of docs. Yeah. But this one I chose kind of on a whim. I know we had talked about it at some point because you don't give a lot of things 5 stars. So I do take note when you do. And this was Minding the Gap is one that you gave 5, and I hadn't seen it. Even though it came out in 2018, I hadn't seen it until today. So I watched half of it yesterday, but I couldn't keep going, so I had to break it up. It's on Hulu, so that's good. Everybody can stream it if nobody's seen it. But why 5 stars, Andrew? That's my first question.
I resist 5 stars because I want to leave room for things that are really, really special. I mean, I just think that when I look at the way other people rate, I imagine most of my 4 stars could be 5 stars. Like, if I was just more like y'all, I guess. So what is it for me? For me, it's this thing of I want to leave space for things that are just somehow just really a cut above. So what made Minding the Gap 5 stars was I felt like that was a really well-made film. Like the artistry was superlative, and what it was doing, what it does, seemed so important to me. And that's kind of the whammy. I mean, I think there's a lot of movies that have worthwhile content, and they may not be ideal in the way that they're made, giallo, I mean, just
Also,
you've got to love the imperfections. I don't have to give everything 5 stars. Like, that's just the way I see that. But when you have something that's super, I want everyone to see this film. So at a certain point, you're like, what's Letterboxd for if not to communicate something like that to other people? I mean, what am I doing if I'm not going to be like, I really want to push this movie, to the front of people's minds? And I know it's irrational. I mean, these stats, they can't possibly mean anything. Like my stat, whether I rate something 4 or 5 can't possibly impact the whole, ecology of Letterboxd. And then what does it even matter? Nonetheless, in my mind, I had this thing, no, it's important this one get 5 stars.
I understand. And for what it's worth, my favorite, I have about 6 people that I read religiously on Letterboxd, and I will literally go to their page, organize all their films by star rating, and I have a list right now. It's private.
Right.
I have a list of all these people's favorite films.
Right.
So
I've done the same thing, yeah.
Yeah, and I am also
similar, yeah.
I also have a list this year of how many films I've given 5 stars to, and I think I'm up to 9 out of 375 movies. So I do not give 5 stars at all easily either. I'm very much in your camp of it almost has to be I think partly what you're saying where you want everyone to see it so it stands out in your reviews and your log, but also that there's something transcendent or precious or just especially meaningful or relatable that kind of it's not a movie anymore to you,
I mean, the part I'm missing is the experience, because I think I might not have rated 5 stars the first time I saw it, and the 5-star rating,
4.5.
The 5-star rating was probably when I saw it with my son, because it was one of those things where it's like, just I would rather before I die, I'd rather see this with my son. And so when I did, I was like, that's it,
Yeah. What was his impression? Did he get what you imagined?
Yeah, I think he admired it. He really likes a fictional film called Mid-90s that has some of the same vibe.
Jonah Hill.
But yeah.
Yeah, and that's also skateboarding, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of a lot of great skateboarding stuff in that film. Yeah.
This one felt to me also. I was trying to think of a comparison, and maybe you can think of this in a way that I couldn't get to before we started talking. But this movie felt like therapeutic and almost like involuntary, like the director Bing was trying to make sense or heal from his own trauma. So it feels very different than like a documentary that's trying to create awareness about something that the filmmaker cares about. This feels extremely like like he had to make this to understand his own life. And that, I don't know if you can think of another example like that where the movie feels like the person literally had to do it. And it doesn't matter if it's bad or good, but there's this almost compulsion to create.
Mm.
I kind of thought of Exotica, but I don't know I don't know that Egoin was trying to like exorcise anything, but this feels like that to me,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
the person's trying to get something out, and this is like the way to do so.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of filmmakers describe their process along those lines. I don't know if I can think of a movie where it felt implicit in the movie itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit what it's about, just in case people haven't seen it?
Oh yeah. So what makes it striking, like you said, is the filmmaker's making a movie about himself and two of his friends. Um, and he started collecting the footage when he was 14, I think. And but he didn't start making the movie until he was in his early 20s. Uh, I haven't done a lot of research on this. The movie is a complete experience for me, so I don't really haven't read a lot about it. I haven't watched the commentaries or anything like that. I do know that he was part of a workshop. The movie was extensively workshopped. I suspect, although I'm not sure, that he didn't necessarily know it was going to be a movie with the themes that it ended up having when he started cutting it. Um, I think he had a co-editor, and I think that's probably part of like the workshopping process. I mean, I think he, there's a lot of teamwork, I think, behind the scenes, even though it's a very, very personal document. And these three young men who grew up in Rockford,
Yeah, I've been
Illinois.
there. Yeah,
You've been
Rockford.
there.
I have, because I went to grad school in Chicago, so I have been to Rockford. It wasn't
Um,
that far.
yeah, so so it's yeah, like Only the Young. I mean, ostensibly, it's a movie about three guys who like to skateboard, and there's a lot of amazing skateboarding footage in the movie. And then, sort of sneakily between the skateboarding footage is just sort of getting a picture of their lives, and and it's um, and it's about how their lives change, things that don't change and things that do change. I think as they get into their 20s.
Yeah, and I think for me, like when I was thinking of it in terms of progress, it was very hard for me once we knew what Zach, the white kid, was like. It was so hard for me to empathize with him. Like once you know that he beats his girlfriend and um then that causes the trajectory of, her saying, "Well, he has good parts too," which infuriates me. My friend Sam, I remember when this came out, my friend Sam was like, I just wept the whole time. I did not cry. I was pretty furious. Like I felt very angry, honestly. And I was angry at my own sort of disconnect there because
Hmm.
I know that the film is trying to have you empathize with all sides, like because Zach had the life that he did and his father left him that we're supposed to, I don't know, I don't know. I found that to be extremely difficult once it was clear because the other two were victims, but Zach was definitely, but then is Zach a victim? Yes. So it was challenging, honestly, to watch and grapple with my own reactions.
Yeah.
I don't know if you found that difficult as well, or if you felt like,
No, it's very different for me.
How so?
Um, for that, we'd have to talk about violence, which I don't really necessarily want to do.
Okay.
Um, some things I can say. When I was 24, I was um, I was a teacher and I had to leave my position because I hit kids.
Hmm.
Um, and when I look back at that, part of the reason that that situation even happened was because it was unthinkable to me that I could be like that.
Ah.
It was not. Didn't know how to process that I even had that potential. When I see, like when we watched The Work, we had
Yeah.
there was again three men, one of whom is sort of the villain. I mean, a little bit, Brian, poor Brian.
Poor
You know,
Brian.
no,
We still
Brian,
feel bad
no.
for him.
So, anyway, when I see Brian, he really gets my blood going. Like I really wish you weren't that way, Brian. Like I have that, I will in my mind and heart sort of push him away from me. Um, I can't do that with Zach. I, he's, he's an intellectual. Like he outthinks himself. He outthinks his own self-hatred. He's driven by it.
Right.
He can sort of understand it, but he can't get ahead of it. And that's very that's very painful. It's painful for me to watch, but not in a way where I feel any distance from him at all.
You know what? It actually, I'll say this. Maybe I can relate in this way where, do you know the movie Triangle? It's
Yeah.
kind of horror. Okay. What gets me so much about that movie is that she's basically locked into like permanently a moment where she is disciplining her child but harming him, and she has to keep doing that because the movie's about time loops, but she has to deal with that, watching the worst moment over and over and over and over. And when you look at parents sometimes, you're like, oh my gosh, how could they do X? But like you're saying, until you're sort of in a situation where you react or act in a way that you thought was absolutely impossible for you, or that there could be no circumstance that would bring such a thing out, or you're not even aware that that's in you, that's what that is saying is, you know, you really don't know what you're capable of. And I don't know why I was having such a hard time with him, especially since he was an addict. Maybe it just hit so close to home because he was so clearly an alcoholic. And I mean, he was drinking the entire film. And every time she said that he abused her, he was drunk. So I don't know. It's so strange to me that I felt
Well, there's another side to it. Tell me what you felt.
just kind of repulsed and also very weary, I think, because I had just watched part of that Anna Kendrick show, Woman of the Hour, and Ali Wong's stand up the other day, and all this stuff about men being,
Yeah.
it's exhausting, and it's exhausting to keep thinking about, are you going to be physically assaulted by men? And, it seems so prevalent. I think I'm just like done with, I don't know, feeling like I can,
Yeah.
yeah.
That was the part I was going to say. I think that's the important part. If if the violence was directed against, if the violence in the film that we were focused on, like Zach's violence was directed against his child,
Oh my gosh.
Bing couldn't make the movie that he made.
No.
Bing has to make the movie that he did make, though, because Bing cannot distance himself from the topic of men hitting women. So he can't. If your friend hits his kid, you don't make the movie but
No,
you're
you
still
call the cops. I hope.
but you're still involved. Like you're still implicated. It's all this. The life part is all the same. The art stuff is totally different. But I imagine part of what's frustrating is that men have to make art about why do men hurt women.
And that I felt it was somewhat irresponsible that the movie was made and no one did anything about that. Like, that seems, I mean, I almost didn't even want to rate the thing just based on, not that I didn't like it, but why didn't he do something about it? He knew that he did that repeatedly, and he kept interviewing the girlfriend and saying, you know, are you still want to be with him? And of course, she's all screwed up, which is really painful. The conversation with his mother about his being stepfather abusing him, and her just sitting there and not being able to say why she didn't stop it. I mean, it's like these things are so difficult, but I was trying so hard to find my way into, but I was so mad. I mean, I was just like, how could she do that? So it's very difficult. I don't know. This really was challenging for me.
Yeah, super super challenging. Yeah, I mean, I imagine what I experience when I see the film is that the interview with Bing's interview with his mom. Um, I mean, the movie plays the movie not a game. It's it's constructed with some care. It starts out by being dudes skateboarding, and then
Right.
you gradually become aware of, oh, these are dudes who are also bonded. They have friendship, and they also have they share a sense of injury or trauma,
And abuse.
which they have some willingness to like share with each other. But it unfolds gradually, and then at a certain point, Bing puts his cards on the table and he says, "I'm dealing with my own history." And now I'm going to interview my mom and make it part of the film. And he does it in a way to emphasize the artifice of filmmaking, which is already what he's been doing with his friends. But that's not, the artifice isn't emphasized because he's been there filming them since they were in the skate park, and he's just filming them doing tricks, you know. So it's all kind of, there's a continuum. But with his mom, he's like, I need another cameraman. I need someone who's filming me when I do this. Then he interviews his mom, and then it sort of, that's when we first become aware that, you know, Bing has been assaulted by his stepfather, and that
Well, with
his,
his brother too, where his brother said he
yeah,
heard him through the next room and he was beaten so badly that it was like anguish, like he felt.
yeah, yeah. But we don't, we get pieces, but we can't necessarily put it together.
Hmm.
Um, and then so the moment with Bing's mom, I feel like it's a deeply meaningful moment to say, why did you let this happen? And for her to
Yes.
say, I don't have a good answer for you. I think in that moment, I think Bing would say the same thing. Why can't you recognize that your friend is abusive to his partner? And why can't you do anything about it? I mean, we think of family, we don't equate those things typically. Family is supposed to be sort of the domain. It's where you make it, your parent makes the family what they want it to be. That hasn't been my experience of family. It wasn't my experience of being a parent. I mean, you're not in charge of the domain. You are also wrestling within a context. You are always wrestling within a context. I got into the most trouble when I refused to acknowledge that I couldn't simply shape my family to the way I wanted it to be. And that denial that I was wrestling with a context that was bigger than me was part of, you know, that was part of a problem. That was something I had to sort of wrestle with. So anyway, the fact is, like, I'm not sure that Bing's situation with Zach is much different from Bing's mother's situation. I can't be alone, so I have to have a partner. I have
Right.
this partner.
Right.
Sometimes he's terrible, sometimes he's sweet. He hurts my son. Now there we might be saying this is where art stops, and you turn off the camera and you say, you are no
Right.
good, you are a bad mom, you are a bad person. But the fact is, Bing isn't interested in saying my mom is a bad person, I don't want my mom to, you know, I want to disown my mom. I'm not even trying to make her look bad, I just want you to see this is how we are.
And also, she it may be cultural. I thought maybe that the way that they were interacting, but she also her remorse was not necessarily saying I didn't know about it. She didn't say like, because she was at work. So this guy's stepfather was at home all day. He was retired and he would just beat him every day and the mom was gone. But there's no way the mom didn't know what was going on because it was also happening to her. But what she does say is, which I think is where the real love and the feeling that I can see is like, she's like, I will do this movie. I will do whatever you want me to do that you need. Whatever you need to heal, I'll do it. And then she has that line that you just mentioned. I've always wanted to be married and have a kid, and he was available. And I don't know. It's hard to wrap my brain around that concept or that motivation as being stronger than safety. But I don't know that. I mean, I wonder what documentaries are trying to sort of get out of us in that way.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Was the intention as far as the audience is concerned, do you think?
I mean, I think audience probably comes second. I suspect. I mean, that seems perverse to say. No doubt, somebody somewhere was walking. I'm being very speculative. No doubt, I say it like that. No, there is a doubt. But I'm guessing. I
Uh-huh.
imagine in my head a scene. Bing has collaborators. He's showing them footage. At a certain point, they're like, what do you think? I think maybe this is the story. Now, when people say this is the story, they mean two things. Because when you work with kids on writing, which I did as a teacher, it's the same process. You are trying to find the jolt. You're trying to find the place where they get engaged, where they are interested in their own material. They don't know. They don't know what they're most interested in when they start. You try to get them to do some writing, and you hope they find something in the writing that engages them. So it's about them. You're like, I think maybe this is the part that interests you the most. That's part of what happens. There's another part of it, which is what's worth sharing, and that's
Mm-hmm.
audience. I mean, you like to talk about the line of vocation is about finding out where your deep joy and the world's deep need meet.
Meat.
That meeting place. I mean, I think the theory is when you have that quickening of the heart as an artist, that's generally where you should go, because generally that's basically what you need is very likely to be more closely related to what other people need. So I suspect the way that works for like me in my individual situation is, I don't like to talk about how violence functions in my own life and in situations where I have been a violent person. And but because Bing Liu was willing to say, I've been a victim of violence. I also love the person who put me in the path of violence, and I love Zach, and he's a violent man, and I think I need that. It's about making things speakable that are otherwise not speakable.
That allow conversations to happen as a result, or even if they're only internal.
That allow conversations to happen. So
Right.
the thing about your frustration with Bing and Nina, Bing goes to Nina and he says, I'd kind of like to talk to Zach about that he
Yes.
hits you. And Nina
Yes.
says, I don't want you to do that. That's real. It, that's really, it's one of the things that I've wrestled with, that I've heard shared with me a number of times. Like, when someone is in an abusive relationship, you cannot win that by saying, you're being abused and I'd like to disrupt your life by challenging and confronting. You actually can't. I think a lot of people who've been in the position of mentor or trying to help someone, usher someone through that situation, would say you have to work with where people are at. They may have a limited recognition that the relationship is bad for them, but you can't win that one by saying this is bad for you. And because then what you are doing is you are seating yourself in the throne. I am the person who tells you this relationship is bad for you. But the whole problem with bad relationships is that you've been dethroned. It's about somehow or other you've got to get in your own seat, which means everyone else has to respect the fact that you get to say when you're done. No one else gets to say. No one else gets to say when you're done. You have to give the person that autonomy. You say when you're done. And so that moment of being saying, I would like to make this part of the movie, and Nina says nicely, like, I don't really care about your movie. I do care about keeping things on even keel with, my kid's dad and this guy who's sort of trying in his own fucked up way to romance me. I mean,
Right.
no wonder the movie is infuriating for you. I don't find it like shocking in the least.
Well, but I didn't want to be angry because
But
I know exactly
yeah,
what you're saying. Like we talk about, you know, AA, Al-Anon, codependency. We talk about those things as friends, and I know that you have a rich understanding of those things more than I do at this point because I feel new to these things. But at the same time, I do know, like as deep down in my soul as is possible, that people are not ready until they're ready, and that some people are never ready. And people and life and pain and circumstances can overwhelm the person to a point that you wouldn't even think is possible to endure, and people will still not see that they're being harmed or that they're harming themselves, or they're fine with harming themselves because Zach even admits later that he hates himself and that's why he drinks. And so there is this kernel of, okay, because some people just say, well, I drink on the weekends and I do this and I do that, and they make all these excuses instead of looking at what's going on. At least Zach, I think, says, okay, I know why I do this, but I hate myself. And what do you do when a person says they hate themselves? How can the starting point be different if they don't determine that? So, yeah, it's so tragic.
that was such a dilemma for me. Yeah, I couldn't for a while in therapy. I couldn't get anywhere because I was so angry at the therapist for not accepting the premise that I was shit.
Right. Which, of course, we can't, not we, because I'm not a therapist, but
right.
of course, people cannot do that for other people because it's not
no.
It's not
but
true.
I was just very stubborn. I was just like, I reserve the right to be mad at you for not accepting my perspective on myself.
Right.
Look, the other part I don't want to talk about that I will talk about because it's in the spirit of the movie to talk about these things is I don't have all that much familiarity with Al-Anon and AA, and I mean we never really talked about the history. Like I only got engaged with it because of my son. I was like, my son is someone close to me. I live with him. He's struggling with substance use. I am now categorized that, but there was a whole thread in my life going back to my divorce and what my ex-wife said to me of like, you are the child of alcoholics and you need Al-Anon for that reason. But that's hard to do. I didn't accept that at the time. I wasn't willing to go and sit in rooms for a long time after I got that statement. I mean, she said it early in the relationship. I mean, then it was said more pointedly when this is partly why I'm divorcing you. And the fact is, like, and this is, I think, part of what the movie is about is how are we going to not pass it on, the various wounds? How do we not pass them on? And we struggle, and the reason we struggle, and you see it so clearly, that's why I think it's a beautiful, really beautiful movie about this. We have to navigate the part where, can you acknowledge that your parents messed you up? Because there's something in that, and I always thought it was about allegiance to my parents, because I think of my parents as loving people, and they love me in particular. So it did not compute for me to express any kind of like anger or frustration with them. But I think there's another side to it, and I don't know how to put it. I always thought I was protecting them, but I think I was protecting me. that there's something about, oh, they didn't victimize me. They didn't victimize me. There's something about that the real heart of it is I don't want to relive the moment in which I was a victim. It's really about like owning a piece of myself more than it's who they are. No, it's about who, and it really isn't about who they are. I mean, we're talking about stuff that happened like, fuck. Because
A
how
long
old am I?
time ago.
We're talking about stuff. We're talking about stuff that happened 50 years ago, right?
And they're what you're saying honestly reminds me of Kier, because Kier's character loves his dad, right? He loves his dad. He cries at his grave. He can't
Right.
he doesn't want to reconcile the fact that his dad beat him and that he harmed him with the good times and the love that he felt. And then he says something like, this is the way my dad was raised, and so my dad told me, well, this is all I know.
Very, very important moment. So that moment really stood out to me on this watch.
Yes.
I've thought a lot about this too, because corporal punishment, very, very difficult topic for me. It's one of the few situations in which I feel like I went with my religion over my conscience, and it is very hard for me to forgive my religion for that, because I wasn't really. I mean, you can fill in the pieces. Like, I had an incident in my 20s where violence like ruined my life, and it never occurred to me that I was ever going to try to employ violence against my kids. But I was part of a fairly conservative religious community that was like, this is how you raise kids, and they were very explicit about this. This is what you have to do. So then I had to come to terms with that, which is very interesting. Being part of a community of parents who didn't generally practice that, and being observed practicing it was a experience I cannot describe. It's one of those cases where it's like, wow, I really do not fit in. Anyway, the reason corporal punishment is so hard to root out is because so many people were hit as kids. So the fact is, you can't win it anecdotally, because many, many, many people were hit as kids, and they didn't experience it as trauma, at least not that they're aware of. More to the point, I think the research, when the research gets nuanced, it says things like, the way my therapist put it to me is, spanking your kids isn't doing what you think it's doing. You think you need it in order to have authority, and in order to be able to, like, in order to have like have discipline be a thing that you have in your family. You think you need it in order to have the discipline, but it's not actually, you don't need it for that. And because you don't need it, it'd be better that you didn't do it.
And that's kind of what Kier says, where when Bing first asked him about his father, he says, well, right, today it would be called child abuse, but back then it was just, like good parenting.
Yeah.
Or,
I mean, right.
Or just regular parenting.
My daughter would be irate. I mean, she had some sense of like, not every parent does this, and she would just be like, you are wrong. You are unfair to do this. And at the time, I was like, I felt like you are good at rhetoric, little girl. Like, you are a small child. You are very good at rhetoric. Like, the words you're putting together are effective and make a lot of sense. What you're missing is the context in which you aren't doing what you need to be doing. And actually, it is incumbent on me to make you do certain things. All of which is fine. What we do, though, is we fence off this little area and say what's in this space isn't violence. And it doesn't make any sense. Like, the fence doesn't really make any sense. And all of the parenting propaganda that comes out of American evangelical culture about parenting has to do with that pretense that this can be done in a way that's separate from anger and separate from violence. So whatever. I mean, it's
And
just
that's
it's messy as shit.
well, and that's kind of what honestly the closest I got to tearing up was when he was talking to his brother, and his brother was saying that he would walk around the house and be afraid of when the dad was gonna just say anything, so he'd have to close the doors because the heat had to stay in. And so one particular day, he felt like he was okay and that he didn't make any stupid mistakes. And then his dad just comes in and cuts his hair. And
You look stupid.
right. And I was thinking, this kind of reminds me of what somebody said in a meeting once where they were talking about how they said, well, this was about the hurricane, where they were like, oh, the hurricane happened. I'm so glad that I didn't drink because there was a hurricane, And the guy was like, I told this to my therapist, and my therapist said, you're an alcoholic. You don't need a reason to drink. So the same thing for the abusive person. There's all these rules, right? But they don't need reasons to abuse.
Right. I mean,
it's so arbitrary, all of it.
Now that my daughter is an adult, if we were having this conversation, I would, be more willing to say, yeah, I'm sorry that we spanked you. At the same time, I think we would be able to come to an understanding that it's not crazy to say that isn't child abuse. Like, I understand Keir's, ambivalence about calling it child abuse, because the essence of the abusive part is in the, you look stupid, I'm going to cut your hair. Like, there's something much deeper going on. It's not about the physical contact of hitting your kids. It's about creating an atmosphere of fear.
Right.
To really create an atmosphere of fear, you have to work at it, and you have to do things in an arbitrary fashion. I mean, so I'm not like, let's go round up all the parents who ever spanked their kids and lock them up. Now, but again, that's the funny thing, is that it's really, we're doing this like trying to take the fences down and trying to acknowledge like the problematic dimensions to hitting your kids. Meanwhile, men have been doing this about hitting women, and the fences are much, much stronger. The rhetorical fences are much stronger. Zach feels comfortable saying, and this is like a lot of our favorite. Sean Connery is notorious for having like done similar rhetorical stuff. Like, well, there's certain situations in which you got to do it.
Yeah, he literally says, if a woman is being such and such, she deserves to be slapped.
So it's not so funny because it's so much more. I mean, none of this is funny. I mean, but I think it's understandable that you watching a movie that's inviting you to have sympathy for a man who struck his partner is like, that's a long road.
In front of their child multiple times, like broke the coffee table with her body. And then I'm supposed to watch the rest of this movie. And then I'm also angry at Bing for not calling the cops. And then I'm kind of angry at everyone who saw this movie at Sundance and didn't say anything, or maybe they did. I don't know. The train of thought. And I'm saying this is why I'm kind of glad that it was for progress, because I don't think that this is something within me that's good. That not having compassion just because it's men. I just am exhausted from it. And I feel like more recently, the things that are being made and put into the world are men being violent, and not in like an action movie way. Like, I'm not going to get down on Terrifier 3 because, but
did you see Terrifier 3?
No, of course not.
Okay.
But I have read so much. I've read a bunch about it, but then I read Walter Chaw's review, and he was just talking about the state of the world and that this is cathartic. But then when it's like, but men who see it are laughing in the theater when these horrible things are happening, like not just horrible, very, very, very bad. And it's like, oh, we're just supposed to what? Like, this is okay, the way that everything is going with men. And then I hear my friend talking about dating app stuff where she's with these guys and it's just very frightening, and I don't really want to be frightened. I want to be able to have empathy and be able to think about where they're coming from, and it's becoming more difficult to do that, and I don't know why that's happening. That's probably an unanswerable question because it's so many things. But this movie touched on a bunch of those points that I've been seeing lately.
Yeah. I mean, the most I can come up with is that if you want a less violent society, you have to find ways to resolve things other than force, and that's the essence of resolving problems without force is, you know, more democratic processes.
But we're also talking about like
And
sins
it's
of the father and cycles of abuse, right? I
yeah.
mean, we're also
But
talking
I just
about
mean
like,
like I mean on the broadest possible level, like we have we are all everyone in the country is right now caught up in an abusive relationship. I mean, we are expected to support a presidential candidate who's supporting massive violence. What we're told is we've got to support the candidate that supports the violence because the alternative is someone worse. And, that's that's when we know we're in trouble.
well, and I think that's why our art is now either apocalyptic or very violent. Like even when I saw The Substance, I was like, man, we're getting to be so intense. And I'm not even saying I know these are movies, but certainly there's a degree to which this is a reflection of the culture. I know it's a French director, so but there's something about the things that we're enjoying that have to do with like betrayal. Like even Nicole Kidman's stupid Netflix show that came out. I love Nicole, but that show was so dumb and it's just all about betrayal and like not being able to trust people and not being able to take people at face value. It's I don't know. I feel like we're just so hopeless in our art and that we're like enjoying it as catharsis
Yeah.
because we all feel so helpless.
All right, but with minding the gap, you think of minding the gap, you feel you feel you felt hopelessness coming out of minding the gap.
Yes, I did.
I
Because,
think
yeah,
I think go you go ahead. You should go ahead first.
I felt hopelessness because um, I I didn't get the sense that any of them were able to move forward except maybe Bing. Maybe. It just seemed like it was a snapshot of something without any solutions or any sort of way forward or any sort of
But we talked about Kier. I mean, that is the way forward. Kier starts with um, he starts with my dad beat me, extends it to I really love and miss my dad, who, for example, was there to teach me to be proud of being black.
right, that whole thing, yeah.
Um, and then we get the scene towards the end where he says, "My dad acknowledged, look, I was raised this way. I don't know how else to do it." That's part of where I was trying to head when I was talking about the messiness of corporal punishment. Is that um, in the end, probably most parents outgrow it to some extent and are able to acknowledge, like, you know, that wasn't so great. Or at least they're not like committed to they let go of the fantasy of like I'm going to make you do all the things that you should do. That they let the kids grow up and eventually they have relations with their adult kids. That moment of weren't there, but the way Kier expresses it when we're trying to deal with the paradox of how Kier has his own experience of violence that had to do something to do with his dad, but he loves his dad. I think probably some of the answer is his dad was able to acknowledge I'm not everything I could be. I'm just good enough. And this idea of the good enough parent, which is it's not so much like I was never victimized, nothing ever hurt me, you didn't ever hurt me. It's not about that. But that moment of being able to the moment of Kira's father, I think that was very important that Kira's father was able to acknowledge some measure of doubt. He said, like, all I know, this is all I know. Rather than, you should consider yourself evil, for making me do this. I mean, that's a lot of parents' rhetoric is like,
It's the
this is all
kid's
about your
fault.
choices. If you
Hmm.
chose better, I wouldn't have to do this. It's all on you. Like that kind of head, messing with people's heads, messing with kids' heads. Um, anyway, I think Kier is a very hopeful figure. And it's precisely in that he is able to come to terms with, my dad hurt me, I love him. And he's not committed to he doesn't have Zach's thing of like, when Zach talks about his past, it's always kind of vague. It's always
Uh-huh.
kind of under a cloud.
Because his mother left him when he was like 3 years old, and then he was trying to find what he was missing from his mother and his dad. And
Yeah, he I mean, he's an intellect. He's intellectualized about it, but he's not tuned in. Kier experiences the grief. He's mad. Oh, that's one of the things about Kier is we get to see him mad, little Kier, when he was so mad.
oh, and he was breaking his skateboard.
And his face, I mean, the face of that little kid. It's just clear that like before we meet Kier in his 20s, something has happened, and he's just not. He's not mad Kier. He's he can cope with frustration. He can cope with anger. How else is he, able to be a dishwasher all that time? Later on, he's like, I'm really glad I don't have to do that anymore. Obviously, it was a hard road, and he's like, I'm really glad I'm past it now that I'm a waiter. Like, he has some kind of coping skills. I heard this expression this week. I've never heard it before. I love it. They attribute it to Reba McEntire. I don't know if she's probably apocryphal, but the line is, "What you need in life is a wishbone, a backbone, and a funny bone."
Okay.
And that's what I see in Kier. I mean, Kier's determination to laugh when he can is so moving. To me, it's so moving to see him interact with people. There's that one time when when the white people are bonding over the racist video, and he's just like, he's got nothing. He's like, I can't,
Yeah.
I got nothing for you. Like, but most times he tries to like kind of have a positive demeanor, and I think he has hope. And I think part of the reason he has hope is because it's not under a cloud for him. He looks back and he's like, wow, that really sucked. And he has some measure of acceptance. Like, I grieve my dad. My dad's really gone. I really grieve him. I can live with the fact that I'm also, mad about everything that went wrong for me.
So you don't think that the only thing with him that I was worried about, I guess, was that he would repeat it because I was worried that he would have kids and do that and then be like, well, it'll be fine because I loved my dad, so they'll love me. That was my only just.
I think
I don't want to think
tough.
that though.
I think you have a much better shot if you're like, I think you have a much better shot at transcending the past if you're not trying to repudiate it. I mean,
Okay.
I don't think repudiation works. I mean, that's why the movie is hopeful to me. I mean, I understand the weariness and the anger. You sick of Kyle's, or the Kyle in so many men. I would like to repudiate Kyle. I think it's good that Bing doesn't repudiate Kyle. I mean, there's a commentary track. I haven't listened to it. There's a commentary track with Kyle on it, on the Criterion disc. I mean,
Wow.
Kyle has seen the movie. He saw the movie probably before. I mean, there had to be something where he's like, Kyle, this is what I'm going to show of you in this movie.
Yes, that's why I'm so surprised that it all sort of. I mean, it's kind of like
this is what can happen when you don't repudiate. I mean, in other words, Bing had to be like, people will have to accept. Bing, this is the part where Bing is putting himself out there. People will have to accept that this is my friend. Also, he has done heinous things. And there's something so powerful to me about the choice to like go to lean in on Kyle's violence and lean in on Nina. So rather than it being, even though he had this perfect Three Musketeer structure, at a certain point you realize, oh, Nina is absolutely, there are 4 central figures and Nina is one. And so it's not, he doesn't stop at just asking her like, well, I'd like to confront Kyle about the fact that he hits you. And she's like, I'd rather you didn't. And that's not the end of. It's just part of him negotiating things with her, and then she lets him into her family and other things. She's his buddy's ex, but she's very much, a part of the movie, and she's one of the four figures who gets an update at the end. I mean, it's anyway. I think he's like, this is Nina's story too, and that's also important. That's part of the non-repudiation. I mean, and maybe he's partly taking his cues from Nina. I mean, Nina did both. Nina was like, I'm leaving, and of course she had to leave him repeatedly because it was a process. But also, like, she really did get independent of him, and eventually was like, I'm leaving him behind. Now we're going to deal with each other through the courts, and But even then, she said, I hope this will motivate him to try and do better.
That's just so.
I know.
It's so hard for
But that's better for. It's crucial. I mean, it's. I don't know. I don't believe in scorched earth. Like, I just don't believe in it. I don't believe in. We haven't stigmatized the bad people enough, and that's why we're stuck with more bad people. That doesn't. I can't make sense of that in terms of what I understand about how people get to be bad.
That makes sense. And that's why I'm saying I feel guilty for my instinct reactions. Honestly, I was judging my judgment the whole time, and it's a very uncomfortable position to be in, because I'm like, I'm not right about this. This isn't what love is. My reaction to that suffering and to the pain is not loving. And I think that it was like an open invitation to question that and be like, I'm not better than them in general, like holistically, but I clearly think I am in these areas, or that I would never blah, 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 blah. But I have no idea. And Nina's past and everything, she's like, I don't know what a family is. I wasn't loved. I wasn't touched. So there's just it's kind of like not even giving the benefit of the doubt, but just recognizing my limitations and understanding something that I am incapable of understanding, and therefore erring on the side of compassion is the right way. Criticism and, judgment is just, but it's there. I feel it. And this movie really brings it out on multiple fronts. Even when like you were talking about the racism part, the part where the white guys were talking about that they experience racism also, that was also very hard for me to listen to. And I'm white, but like he's trying to say, like, if you're a trailer trash, this is his words, a trailer trash white person at a black school, then you experience something that, and I could not give him that sort of extension of grace in that moment while Keir is sitting there listening to them talk about this.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's such an uncomfortable watch, Andrew. And I wasn't expecting that. I thought I was just going to be sad.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think without the skateboarding, it sinks. The skateboarding is essential.
Yeah. Well, because that's their escape and their sort of outlet.
Yeah. It's not just about escape. To me, it's about, I know that's the part I thought about a lot on this watch, is just the parts of life that make it worth it to wait all the shit. I mean, parenting is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, you start with, I was messed up by my parents, and I messed up my kids. I mean, how are you gonna
reconcile?
How you gonna live? How you gonna live in a world where you gotta make those kinds of choices? Like, you gotta deal with all of your own stuff, and you have to recognize and live with the fact that you've passed on that stuff to the next generation. What is it? What could possibly be in life to outweigh that? And yet, and that's what the skateboarding represents to me in the movie. So the one note I took was, I got this quote from C.S. Lewis. I know that you appreciate this. This is from Mere Christianity. He said he was talking about politics. This is what he said. He said, the state exists simply to promote and to protect the ordinary happiness of human beings in this life. A husband and wife chatting over a fire, a couple of friends having a game of darts in a pub, a man reading a book in his own room or digging in his own garden. That is what the state is there for. And unless they are helping to increase and prolong and protect such moments, all the laws, parliaments, armies, courts, police, economics, etc., are simply a waste of time. So I think the reason that quote was in my mind after watching Minding the Gap was that the skateboarding, to me, is the part of the movie represents, like, why do we persevere? Like, why try to heal? Why go through all of the pain that healing entails? I mean, that's Zach's thing. It's not so much that he's so demonic, it's that he's avoiding some really, really hard conversations with himself. And as intellectual as he is, as engaging as the conversations he has with himself are, like, he's not dealing with the real shit that's going to really make him feel bad. Um, I'm
Yeah,
sure
and that's what drinking, I mean,
yeah, that's
that's
what the
what that
alcohol is for,
that's
right?
what it is,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. I mean, I guess instead of saying that skateboarding is the escape, that is for him.
Right. Skateboarding is not an escape.
Right.
Skateboarding was where they were really alive. In skateboarding, they were up against, it's not about violence. It's about, you get hurt. You get hurt because you are testing your limits. But it's
Mhm.
like dance, it's like art, it's like anything else. Like, you just, I forget who says it or what they said exactly. Something like, you have to make all these, I think maybe Zach said it, you have to make all these split decisions. Like, you're really, really aware. You're like hyper aware. The stakes are high and things are moving really fast. And you keep, there's beauty in the soaring and there's beauty in the stunts, there's beauty in the jumps and the different things that they do with the skateboard. And what's poignant is that, like, it's something scraped out of this, like, depressed town which has nothing. So the one thing it has is, if you're out skating in these streets with this economically depressed city, like, there's no you don't have to worry about cars. Like, that's the thing that strikes me about all the skateboarding scenes. It's like they're out in this urban wasteland. Like, there's nothing
Mhm.
going on. They're the action. Like, well, we're going to put this hardtop to good use, and they start doing all these amazing moves and soaring through these streets in this beautiful way. I mean, that's what this skateboarding represented to me. And the fact that Keir kept skating is, to me, that's so fascinating to me, is that at a certain point he was like, I'd rather spend more time skating, but I'm going to work. And it's sort of like, oh, this is what maturity is. It's like, you leave behind these, fascinations you have as a kid with these little things that you do that are really important to you, and your parents don't understand why you do them. And then you leave those behind and you become a dishwasher and a waiter, and you are able to buy a car. And it was more complicated than that. Keir's story is more complicated than that. He just wanted to have a life, and part of what he wanted to do with that life was still to keep skating. And in the end, he's still skating because he was able to stay in touch with that part of himself. But it was harder for Kyle. I mean, I think Kyle probably kept skating too. But you could see there were certain points at which Keir acknowledged, like, I don't really go skating with Kyle that much. Like, partly
Right. Their
it's the
friendship.
vibe, and partly it's
Yeah.
just like he's not doing it that much. Um, anyway, Lewis's thing about, like, we tend to tell the story of we tend to tell history in terms of governments and, like, kings and governments and, armies and wars, and it's fundamentally distorting, like, what the point of that's secondary. All of that was just about, like, can a guy get in his garden and garden? Um, and I think about that moment in Chariots of Fire where Eric Liddell is like, I'm going to go to China, I'm going to be a missionary, but I'm also going to run these races because
When I run, I feel his pleasure.
I think, yeah, there's, it's not just about, like, fighting through the injuries to grow, just to grow, to heal, just to heal. I think it's got to be about there is sweetness in life, and we are trying to protect it and protect our
Yes.
own opportunities to savor it.
And we've
Um,
lost sight of that. That's what I'm saying. As a
yeah,
culture, I think
yeah,
we Americans anyway, I think we're losing sight on the value of survival. That's the way C.S. Lewis puts it. Like we're not here to just survive. It's about the value of survival, which is exactly what you're talking about.
yeah.
And it's just so much doom and gloom, and it's like this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is happening, these horrible things are happening everywhere, and we're extremely aware of them, and there's no way out, and it's never going to end, and that's just going to keep notching up as the next months come up. And so I don't really want to see movies where men are beating people and I don't know. I mean, I actually almost wrote a review about this, but I refused to write about TV shows on Letterboxd. But the Kristen Bell show that came on, Nobody Wants This, where she dates the rabbi guy. It's a TV show where it's like she's, not a Jew and she dates a rabbi and there's all these problems and stuff. But anyway, when I got to the end of that show, I was literally crying, and it was not, it's not like this great show, but I was just relieved that there was a male character who was a good person. And that is upsetting to me, because I actually have a lot of really good guy friends, and I don't know why that's not represented just for the good of humanity, so that we can see these things and be reminded. It's just all so, I don't know. So
To
that's
me,
my beef.
Minding the Gap is a 5-star movie for me because it is about goodness. It's about specifically male goodness. I mean, not setting aside the fact that Nina's inclusion in the movie is an important part of it. Even for me, the fact that, I mean, the way Kier and Kyle relate, they have it. They have an age gap. I mean, Kier looked up to Kyle. Kyle, like that story of, like, Kyle was somebody who actually stood up for me, at the skate park. And I imagine it's something similar with Bing, that, like, when your friend is going through, like, a rough time, and that's not to be meant to be a euphemism, like, or when Kyle's going through a rough time, it's a rough time for people who are around him, which goes back to the work. I mean, when you have unresolved stuff, it's going to come out on the people around you. So rather than be like, that sucks, and then forget about him, it's like, no, he's still part of it. He's still part of the movie. And his story goes on. But there's a grace in showing Kyle, and he's not the villain of the movie. He's a part of it. He's a part of it, like the others are. So he's not put in a vault, or put behind a fence, or put behind a wall of some kind artistically. Like, he's just part of the movie. The movie clearly has opinions about, like, wow, look at what happened to his place where they just left the dog there, and
I know, that's
look
horrible.
at how you kind of seem. Look at him carrying in the, I don't even know how many cans of whatever were in that. That he just carts it up, puts it up, like, ready to get started. Like, I mean, the movie clearly is like, no, Kyle, but he's it's not like, well, he's my friend, right or wrong. It's not like there's no limits. I mean, the movie calls him out and pushes him. He gets pushed on his stuff. He gets pushed to say, like, what do you think about the fact that you did this? To the point where he can maybe give some kind of acknowledgement. He gives the acknowledgement that he can. I don't know what he would say today, but the interesting thing is he's in a position to say something today because he's not on the outside. He's in the movie. I mean, he's therefore he's, like, on the commentary track, or he's, like, still.
I understand exactly what you're saying.
So
It's kind of,
when rather than being imagine the documentarian. I know people have felt this way about their documentarian friends, who were like, you're going to be in my movie, and then they ended up, like, being made like the butt or the villain, right? And then, I mean, I know there are artists who have burned relationships that way. I'm sure there are novelists, filmmakers, documentarians who've burned relationships, but like, I'm using you as grist for my statement. Like, that's not what Minding the Gap feels like to me. Minding the Gap feels to me like I love. Everyone has a movie like that. My friend and I, who went to the same summer camp, have talked like for years. Like, it would be so great to make a movie about our camp. It was like that place that was for us, like skateboarding was for these guys. Like, it was the place where good stuff happened, and you went there, and it was like a refuge from all the crap going on the rest of your life, and you got to remember for a while that life can be beautiful and that art can be beautiful and that there's fun and joy, you know. And when you have those places, you want to share them with other people. You want to be able to show people this is what it was like. I feel like Minding the Gap does that. Like, we want you to understand, like, we were free at the park, and it was just beautiful, just soaring through the streets. Like, and I love my friends. And the beauty of the movie for me is that Bing goes beyond that, and he says, to really understand my friends, you've got to understand like their struggles, and you got to understand also that they're flawed. And in Kyle's case, wanting, like, flawed to the point where you might want to recoil.
Mm-hmm.
The movie doesn't recoil. That's the important part. It's not a reaction of like, let's put him at a greater distance. It's actually like, let's draw as close as we can, that as close as he'll permit. You know.
Without judgment.
To me, that's hopeful and loving. And if we're going to talk about masculinity in art and the temptation to like turn people into objects to use in your own, artistic sandbox, to like make things to make a name for yourself, it is a perennial temptation. I feel like Bing is trying to model like a responsible way of turning your life into art.
Yeah. I think that I almost echo D'Angelo here, where it's like he didn't like it, but
No.
he did say something to, I think the last line of his review was something to the effect that of like, I admire it more than I almost feel that the only way that I can appreciate it is by detaching myself, like me, from it. And I think that I'm very grateful to you for putting me through that exercise, because it's almost like an empathy test where I'm now thinking like I have all of these instinctive reactions that should be analyzed and contemplated, and because I don't think that they're right, and I think that your summation and what you've gathered from it is actually far more accurate to its intention
I
than
don't know
mine
about
is.
accuracy. I think it's more about like,
No, your clarity on it, let's say,
it
like
has to
your
do with where you're
understanding.
sitting. I
Yeah.
am Kyle. I mean, it was the same thing with the work. Like, I am Brian. Like, this is, and I'm hoping, I'm trying to find sort of the cure in myself too. Like, can I
Forgive.
live with having been hurt and still be like, I can have a future and I can look for joy.
Yes.
So, yeah, I don't know. I think, it's interesting that I understand what you mean. You experience it as a confrontational work, and you're wondering, like, what's the point of the confrontation? Where do I go with it? I mean, I think in the spirit of Minding the Gap would be to accept where you are right now,
Mm-hmm.
which, and I think I'll link a lot of the pain, not a lot, maybe not a lot of the pain, quite a bit of the pain has to do with a reluctance to accept where we are at the moment. And the wish to pretend that we're somewhere other than where we are is where things really go off the rails. So I don't know if it's necessary for you to like analyze, but to experience the reaction and to own it is, I think that is a good thing, and it is a part of what the movie is part of what makes a movie good.
Well,
Yeah,
no, I'll have to watch it again sometime with the commentary. I think that would be fascinating. It's kind of like I always wish there had been that for like My Kid Could Paint That, or like movies where I really, really want to know from the guy or the
right.
where you're like, I wish this person would just say what really happened because you kind of want to know. But that would be very interesting to hear his take. Andrew, this has been very emotional and very helpful, useful. So thank you for doing this with me. Um, I hope everyone sees it just so that we can chat about it and I can maybe glean more from it. It's actually not that popular. I noticed there weren't like tons of reviews about it from people I follow. So
Yeah.
definitely check it out. I think that it has the capacity to change or at least confront like it did for me. And I'm glad that we kind of had two different approaches that made it a lot more interesting. So pleasure as always, Andrew.
Likewise.
And we'll see you at the movies.